Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Software Testing with Re. In today's video, we are going to explore the waterfall model in software development lifecycle. We'll break it down step by step, look at its phases, the advantages and disadvantages, and how it compares to Agile with simple real world examples. So, if you are ready, let's get started. Alright, so first, what exactly is SDLC? It stands for Software Development Life Cycles, and really, it's just a step by step process that software teams follow when they are building a product. From the first idea all the way to the finished software that's used by the customers. It helps teams plan the work, build the software, test it thoroughly, and deliver it to the customer. And the whole point of using SDLC is to make sure the software gets delivered on time within budget and, of course, that it meets the customer's expectations. Now, let's talk about the waterfall model, which is actually one of the earliest and most well known models in the history of software development. The idea behind waterfall is pretty simple. It follows a linear step by step process. You can think of it like water flowing steadily down a series of steps. Once you move forward, you don't go back. In this model, you have to complete each phase fully before moving to the next one. So there's no overlap and no jumping around between phases. That's why it's called waterfall. Everything flows downward in a order. Here, you can see the phases of waterfall model in SDLC. It's a very clear and step-by-step process. We start with requirement analysis where we can gather and document what the system should do. Then comes system design, planning how the system will be built. Next is implementation, where developers actually write the code. After that, we move into integration and testing to make sure everything works as a complete system. And finally, we have maintenance, keeping the system updated and running smoothly after it's deployed. Let's start with the first phase, requirement analysis. In this phase, the team works with the stakeholders like customers, users, or managers to gather all the possible requirements for the system. Everything is documented clearly so there's no confusion later on. Now, the focus here is on understanding what the system should do, not how the system will be built. In other words, we are figuring out what the user needs, not jumping into the technical details yet. For example, this phase includes getting things like functional requirements, what features the system must have, non functional requirements like performance, security, or usability, and any system constraint like timelines, budgets, or technical limitations. Once the requirements are gathered, the next phase is system design. In this phase, the team uses those requirements to create the overall architecture and design of the system. Basically, they plan out how the software will be built. Now, this is usually done at two levels. First, we have high level design. This covers the big picture, things like the system's architecture, the main components, and how the data will flow between them. Then comes low level design. Here, the team drills down into the details, designing individual modules, functions, or interfaces so that developers know exactly what to build in the next phase. In short, system design turns the what from the requirement phase into the how for the developers. Next, we move into the implementation phase, or as most people call it, the coding phase. This is where the developers start writing the actual code based on the design documents that were created in the previous phase. Each part of the system or module is built and then unit tested independently. Unit testing means checking each individual piece of code if it is working correctly or not on its own before everything is combined together later in the process. After coding is done, we move into the integration and testing phase. In this phase, all the individual modules that were built during the coding phase are combined and tested as a complete system. There are several levels of testing involved here. First, we have unit testing, which happens earlier when each module is tested on its own. Then comes integration testing. This checks whether different modules work correctly or not together. Next is system testing. Now we have to test the entire system as a whole to ensure everything works end to end. And finally, acceptance testing, where we make sure the system meets original requirements and is ready for the customer. The main goal is to verify the entire system works as expected with no major bugs or issues. Once the system is fully tested and approved, we move into the deployment phase, also called installation. This is where the tested software is delivered to the customer or deployed into the production environment. In other words, the product is live now and is available for the end users to start using. At this point, the software is officially released, but the work isn't completely done yet. Next comes the maintenance phase. The final phase is maintenance. Even after the software is deployed and users start using it, the work isn't done because over time the software may need updates, bug fixes, or even new enhancements as user needs evolve. Maintenance make sure the software continues to operate smoothly and meets user expectations in the long run. So, in a way, maintenance is an ongoing process that helps to keep the product reliable and up to date. So, when is the waterfall model actually a good choice for a project? Well, waterfall works best when things are pretty well defined upfront. For example, when the requirements are clear and fixed from the beginning, when the project scope is well understood, meaning there's not going to be a lot of changes. It also works well when the technology is stable and there is no need for experiment or trying new tools. Waterfall is also a great fit for projects that have regulatory or compliance needs, like in the government, defense, or medical industries, where you need to do a lot of documentation of formal approvals. And finally, Waterfall can work well for short term or low risk projects where the teams can follow a clear step by step plan. Let's talk about some of the advantages of using Waterfall in SDLC. First, it's simple and easy to manage. Because Waterfall follows a clear step by step process, it's easy for teams, especially the newer teams, to understand and follow. Second, the stages are well defined. You always know what phase you are in and easy to track the process throughout the project. Third, waterfall works really well for documentation driven projects. If the project requires a formal documentation like requirements, design specs, test plan, waterfall naturally supports that structure. And finally, it's great fit for regulated industries like government, defense, or healthcare where detailed documentation is required for compliance and audits. Of course, like any model, waterfall also has some disadvantages you should be aware of. First, it's not very flexible. If the customer changes their mind or new requirements come up later, it can be really hard to adjust once you have moved forward. Second, testing happens late in the process. Since testing is done after coding is complete, you might find major bugs late in the project, which can be expensive to fix. Third, it's hard to go back to earlier phases once they are completed. If you discover a mistake in the requirements after you are already coding, it's not easy to undo everything and start over. And finally, waterfall may not fit well for fast paced or evolving projects where things can change quickly or where frequent customer feedback is needed. So, what's the main difference between waterfall and agile? Waterfall is a rigid and sequential process. You complete one phase fully, like requirements, design, coding, and then move on to the next. If you realize later that something needs to change, it's very difficult to go back and adjust things. Agile, on the other hand, is flexible and iterative. You develop the software in small pieces called iterations or sprints, and after each cycle, you deliver a working version of the product. You can get feedback, make changes, or adapt as you go, which is great for projects where requirements evolve. Here's a simple example. Waterfall is like building a house. You design everything up front, then build. And once construction starts, making changes is hard and expensive. Agile is like developing a mobile app. You build a basic version first, show it to the users, get a real feedback, add new features, and keep improving over time. Both models have their place. It just depends on the project and needs of the customer. Thank you so much for watching this video on waterfall model in SDLC. I hope you found it clear and helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel, which is Software Testing with Re. And tell me in comments, would you like me to prepare a video on a deeper comparison of waterfall and agile? I would love to hear your suggestions and see you in the next video.